everyone, it's Vanessa, V. Welcome to my channel where we talk about reigning over your life, living life in victory, yes, and conquering what's holding you back each day using simplified strategies that work for you. Today, we are going to be discussing the reopening of life sort of back to normal and how we can do that in the best way that works for us. So we'll be going over a really simplified step-by-step process about what I found works for me in these situations and how to make it work for you too. Really quickly, as always, I do just want to preface that what I'm not is a mental health care professional or a healthcare professional. I'm an actress and a speaker, among other things, and I'm living with post-traumatic stress disorder. I was diagnosed years ago, and I use these videos and workshops that I host to share simplified strategies that I've mastered. And my hope is by sharing these strategies, they can work for you just like they have for so many others. And before we get started, if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel. That way you don't have to go looking for my videos. So yeah, reopening. Like, how are you guys doing? How are you doing? Are you excited or freaked out? I think I'm a bit of both. I've heard from quite a few people about how they've been struggling through the quarantine process and the fact that they just want to get out. They just want it all to stop and end and basically escape this situation. But I've also heard from a lot of you that you are nervous about going back to kind of the way things were. I'm feeling a little bit of a mix of the two, and I'm guessing that most of us kind of are as well. So I want to talk about that. And even though it's not that much of an exciting topic to think about, or we don't want to think about it at all, it is important to address. If you'll recall from my previous video about the quarantine blues, by the way, if you haven't seen it, I'll post a link below. But if you'll recall from that video, I did share a little bit about my experiences with isolation and the fact that that's kind of been a part of my life leading up to being diagnosed, but also throughout my healing process. And a lot of that isolation is just being home alone or feeling socially isolated or emotionally isolated. There's a lot of different ways that we can feel that. And I've had to figure out how to come out of that in a way that works for me and is actually beneficial in that process. So part of what we're talking about today is how I'm able to do that. I have allergies, and as you'll remember from my previous video where my mascara was just completely melting off of my eyeballs, not that it was on my eyeballs, but my eyes are still watering and my nose is running. It's just a big fiasco. But anyway, so I'll be having to take some breaks to the topic. Today, we are going to be talking about the reopening. Now, I know that there's been a lot of reopening over the past few weeks for different states and different areas around the world, but for my area, that's kind of happening in the next few days. So I wanted to talk about that and how we can do it in a way that really works for us, that's customizable for us, and helps the transition be as smooth as possible so that we can still enjoy our lives every day, continue on living happily and healthily, and doing that in a way where we feel like we have the most control over our own situation. And we're not just taking the plunge and jumping right in. On the flip side, being super scared at home, afraid to go out and not knowing how to handle it in the best way. All right, so what's our number one goal? Our number one goal, in my opinion, based on my experiences, is making it as smooth as possible. Smooth, whatever that means for you. Why is that important? A few reasons. One, because of the brain. You knew I was going to bring that up. Also, just our joy and happiness, and why not make life easier to live in? First and foremost, it's a really good idea to understand mechanically what's going on, because that's going to help us understand the solutions that we need to apply for ourselves in the situation. Okay, so just a few highlights about the brain in this circumstance. If you haven't seen my previous video about the brain under stress, I have the link below. Feel free to watch that. That can help you understand what I'm talking about today even better. But because there have been so many changes day to day on what's okay to do, what's safe to do, what's not safe to do, what is safe, what isn't safe, there's a lot of labels that are going on that can be very confusing, especially since some of them haven't been very clear, or there's been conflicting information on how accurate that information is. It may make this transition even more difficult because our subconscious brain has just been like, no, you just told me all these things are suddenly unsafe, and now suddenly we have to go do them? Aren't those things unsafe? We've sort of retrained our brain into thinking this way, and that can cause a lot of disruptions for us if we don't prepare appropriately for what our specific needs are. As I mentioned before, I have been hearing from quite a few of you about sort of different ends of the spectrum with quarantine and reopening. So the quarantine for a lot of us made us feel confined. And if we felt as though that confinement wasn't necessarily a choice or did not come across as a very safe thing for us to do, our gut reaction may have been and may still be to escape that situation, because our brain thinks we're in an unsafe situation, we need to get out. And that is probably going to dictate for us our actions as we move out of quarantine into a more normal way of living. Now, if you are sort of on the other end of the spectrum, where this quarantine didn't necessarily mean confinement, but it was more of a safety decision, then your reaction to reopening may be a little bit of the opposite, where you don't really want to leave, and being home is a safe thing. So you're not feeling like you need to escape. Instead, you might be feeling, I need to stay home. Home feels comfortable. I don't know what's going to happen. I just want to wait until the danger's over to leave. So the first step, my first suggestion for this would be to identify for yourself which two schools of thought are you. Are you more of the escape artist reaction, or are you more of the homebody need to stay in my safety box type of mindset? You may also find, kind of like me, that you're a mix of the two. Understanding our point of view about the situation and how we're working mechanically is going to help us as we prepare to go about this transition in a way that's specific and works for us. Either way, both of those are rooted in fear, and we don't want to live or make decisions based in fear. Acknowledging the fact that that's our reality and that's what's going on and perhaps driving our decision making can help us to sort of break out of that and go, okay, I understand that that's how I feel, but is that real? And how can I think of it differently and therefore act differently in a way that's healthier for me, more sustainable, and feels good, where I'm in control, not my irrational brain. No matter how you're viewing the situation is okay. I'm not saying one's better over the other. I'm just saying that it's best if we understand what our go-to move or our default reaction is to this situation. That way it doesn't just bring us on a roller coaster ride or shroud us in fear, and we don't really understand why or what's going on. And if we have to counteract that, making healthier decisions for ourselves in the most educated way possible. If we don't understand that about ourselves, then as we sort of start to transition or not transition, there can be some reactions that come up that we're not expecting, especially if we throw ourselves into it or force ourselves to do things that don't quite feel comfortable yet, whether we realize it or not. In doing that, for some of us, that may cause our brain to go, whoa, there is such a shock to the system. This is extreme. This is unsafe. And then you may find that you end up having some stress and anxiety symptoms that you weren't expecting. Some of those things can be panic attacks, feeling extreme moods, agoraphobia, obsessive compulsive tendencies, avoiding going home or dreading going home, and just not making smart decisions because we're in a reactive state. And then we can start to feel out of control of the situation and our stress and anxiety. And that's not what we want. We want to feel like we have control, and we want to feel good about the choices that we're making, or at least feel the best we can about the choices that we're making. The less surprises in this case, and I love surprises, the better. That leads us into step 2, preparation. And I know a lot of us out there don't like to prepare. We just like to go and do. And that's cool, but in situations that have such heightened stress and anxiety, or where the stakes are higher, it's really good for our brains if we've pre-thought or pre-prepared for situations that can come up, because then there's less triggering of our fight, flight, or freeze reaction, and things feel more certain and predictable. We're really trying to counteract the disruptiveness that this whole situation has caused and create more of a stable structure for us to stand on. Now you may be thinking, I'm just gonna go and do it. I just can't wait to get out. I just wanna go and live my life. And I totally understand that. I've definitely done that in the past. But for me, what's ended up occurring is that even though I felt like, ooh, I'm just gonna go and do, because I wasn't aware how high my stress and anxiety was, I would start to have certain reactions like what I just listed in the first step that I wasn't prepared for, took me by surprise, and ended up sometimes taking me all the way back to square one. So I found that there are some key factors that you're gonna wanna pay attention to. Writing down a list of activities that you want to do and or have to do. And then after that, going back over that list and considering your comfort level with those things. Are you comfortable doing them right now? Are those things that you'd rather put on hold? Is it a smart idea, or is it just something that you emotionally want to do, therefore you think it's a good idea? Silly brain. And then lastly, going over those things and figuring out, okay, if this is something I'm going to do, how can I do it in a way that is the most comfortable for me and is the most safest way for me to do it? So what we're doing in step 2 is helping ourselves as we prepare to transition out, how to do that in a way that's comfortable for us. And the reason it's important to feel comfortable in this process isn't just because you should feel comfortable. It's gonna, again, not have our brain become as triggered because it's not gonna feel as unsafe. Hopefully this will help you not be as on edge or as tense, and you can actually enjoy the process much more. And that takes me to step 3, which is basically just monitoring our relaxation level, our comfort level, our inner dialogue, how we're feeling, just monitoring that process before, during, and after an activity that we end up doing. So 1, identify which one you are, or if you're a mix of the two. Are you eager to escape and get out and do, or are you feeling a little bit frightened of doing that and wanting to stay in, or a little bit of both? The next thing is preparation and making that preparation work for you. And finally, keeping tabs. This applies to before, during, and after the activity. How am I feeling? What's my stress and anxiety level at? Am I relaxed? Am I feeling tense? And as you go through this process, trying to make sure that you're not doing things and making decisions just because you might be feeling left behind by everybody else, or you're feeling socially pressured to do certain things. You should just do you. You have every right to do that. But also, if we go into situations and make decisions that really in reality we're like, ugh, that's only telling our brain that we are being forced into a situation that's unsafe. And that's most likely going to cause added stress and added anxiety. If at any point you start to have stress and anxiety or panic attack symptoms, that's totally understandable. Make sure to try and use the stress hacks that we've gone over. Reassure yourself that if you are in fact in a safe situation or environment, that you are in fact safe, and decide what's best for you to do next and be comfortable with that decision. Making sure that you feel comfortable and you feel safe is the number 1 goal, and that's what's going to help this transition be as smooth as possible. Now, I know this all sounds like a lot of thinking. Ugh, trust me, if I didn't think it was important to do, I definitely wouldn't be bringing it up. But I found in situations like this, it's actually going to help propel us further and faster in a much more sustainable way. But as always, make it work for you, customize it to you, and make sure whatever you do, it feels good and it's smart. Thanks so much for tuning in today, you guys. I hope that this is really going to help us as we start to move forward. If your area has already started to open up and you've been experiencing this transition already, feel free to comment below and let everyone know what's worked for you or what you still need help with. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like or dislike this video, it's cool either way. And as always, feel free to follow me on social media. Today is going to be an amazing day for you. Keep being true to you, and I'll see you next time.